All right, and it is now recording. This is Johnny Lee with Peace at Work and the E-Panic button, and we're going to be talking about de-escalating hostile clients or behavior. One note, if you wish to share in this event, comment, questions, things like that, go ahead and within the GoToMeeting interface, you could go to the questions tab and shoot me any questions or chat. I'll repeat any questions or comments, but I will not identify any participants. So I think it'd be more interesting if we had a dialogue, so feel free to interrupt, ask questions along the way, and then certainly at the end as well, we'll have time for questions. This will take roughly about that, I think about 3/4 of an hour is what I anticipate. And this is meant to be sort of a broad, very overview sort of training, looking at some key tips, some suggestions, some ideas about what you could do to prevent things from becoming violent. Now let's just look at one quick example. Now, there's millions out there, but this one was not too long ago. We have a shooting at a union. Now, so that's almost like yes, it is a workplace. They're not employees, but they're members of the organization. There was an election at the union, and there was a disagreement about how the election turned out, and there was an argument that just happened then in the parking lot of the union building. After the argument, one of the members, it's not anyone who is being voted, it wasn't one of the candidates, but one of the members came back and shot two of the union officials. So the point is there's a disagreement. It's politics, right? Do you know anyone who disagrees politically with you? So this disagreement, discussion, argument, conflict, it then escalated to the point of someone pulling out a gun. I'm not, by no means am I blaming the victim, saying that they did not handle it well. It's just a matter of looking at an example of a case. Now, whatever this might be, this is the heart of it. We've got a difference of opinion, a discussion. This isn't a matter of war. It's not domestic terrorism. It's not domestic violence where someone's, shooting an ex-partner that's leaving them. It's over a disagreement, and that's what we're trying to address. That's the majority of the cases. What could be done? Why does it happen? When you think about it, we've all been in arguments, we've all been in discussions, but what would take it to the level of violence? When is there a person feels justified to physically attack someone? Now, there's a lot of factors here. Of course, I just finished up a webinar on threat assessment, and that's looking at the characteristics of the individual, right? Like their history of violence, their ideology, their mannerisms, and that's all part of the factor. But just looking at the interaction, we can see that there's some commonalities. If I may, when I think about violence, I think about violence all the time. It's truly about power and control. It's about effectiveness, ability to have influence. And so when people are arguing, they're trying to convince you of something, but when they can't do it, then they resort to violence. So one of the key things that I want to make clear, whether you're dealing with a client or dealing with a coworker, or even dealing with a spouse or a partner, is it's not necessarily the issue involved. Yes, that's the important part, that grievance. Let's go back to the example of the election didn't go the way the guy wanted. Yes, that's why they're angry, but at the heart of it, that there's something about respect. There's something about power of influence. They did not get what they want. We can speak to how they've been raised and their personality, about the way, but how they respond when they don't get what they want. But at the heart of it is a feeling of no control. People commit these acts because they feel like it's their last resort. Let's address that, deal with that feeling of uncontrol, of being ineffective, of not being respected. These are the things that we could help. These are the points that we need to focus on to help prevent that person from making the decision to use violence. Now, what are we going to briefly go over here in this short training? We'll look at the extent of the issue, what certain industries or where it typically comes from, and then in terms of the de-escalation, we'll talk about broadly maintaining your own calm, about how to address hostility when someone's aggravated, obnoxious, angry. What do you do there? And then there's points about when they cross certain lines where it needs to be addressed, where they're so inappropriate. It's important that you set boundaries. And then at some point, what do we do with the danger if they're being literally threatening? How do you handle that? That, when we're talking about the safety, security aspects, that's certainly related to your environment, about how you maintain a safe environment. And then finally, at the end of it, it's very important that there's documentation about where do you go from here after the incident. So moving forward, again, feel free to ask questions or make comments along the way. Just to give a little one-on-one on workplace violence, I realize this could be, the context could be schools, just, people on the street, but within the context of workplace violence, it's been identified as 3 types. Type 1 is strangers, which is like robbery, sexual assault. Type 2 is customers and clients. So there we have a patient assaulting a nurse, or a student assaulting a teacher, prisoner assaulting a corrections officer, things like that. I have this in bold because I believe this is the majority of the issues. Like when we talk about de-escalating hostile clients, I'm assuming that many of you may be talking about the public that you serve, the clients. Yes, it could refer to your employees or your own kids, whatever, but in this context, it's most likely here, as we'll see in a moment. Type 3 is coworkers or ex-employees. Type 4 is when it's the domestic partner committing the violence. So this could be, you have the receptionist employee and her ex-boyfriend assaults you, like the scumbag loser doesn't have a job boyfriend, but it could very well also refer to 2 coworkers. So this happens a lot where we have 2 employees romantically involved and there's an assault. Is that a coworker thing? I don't think so, because it probably did not stem from the workplace issue. It wasn't because, oh, you took my stapler, right? It's not because of that. It's because I think you've been flirting with another guy. So the source of it is the intimate partner relationship. Now, let's get back to the point. The majority of these issues are customers and clients. When we try to look at a feel of how prevalent it is, here are the factors of homicides. These are occupational homicides. These numbers reflect employees who were killed on the job due to their factors. So as, let me see if the legend shows up. Yeah, the legend's there. Blue is employees, is the ex-employee who comes back and shoots their boss. The orange or yellow line is domestic violence, as I described earlier. But that red line is when we're talking about homicides from a client, and this is really where we see the majority. I've been doing this for a long time, and it's social services, it's school, it's health departments, it's government, education to a degree, but it's these kind of places. When we dig into these numbers a little bit more, we actually find that it also includes service establishments and retail. So where actually some of the highest numbers that we're looking at is actually in bars. This is when the bartender gets assaulted by a patron. And so you can just imagine that context. It's kind of unique. Oh, I spelled domestic wrong up there. I got to fix it. Just to give you a context of what's going on in terms of the homicides. There was a spike in 2007, but then it dramatically went back down to the rates around 30 or 40 a year. Now, personally, that's horrible. 1 is too many, but when you think of the hundreds of millions of people working every day in America, these numbers are somewhat low compared to car accidents, falls, or suicide. It's a much higher thing. But what I want to point you towards is looking at the non-lethal issues. This is much older data, just different subset of data, and this is from the 90s. Bureau of Justice Statistics National Crime Victimization Survey. So you can see that they had the average annual of over 1,000 homicides. That's actually been reduced quite a bit. It's much lower now, more like almost cut in half, like around 500 a year. So thank goodness for that. But what we have to see is while there's fewer homicides, we see the verbal harassment, which includes cursing and being yelled at, threats, where there's a verbal threat being made. These were happening, millions of these things happening every year. Simple assault, aggravated assault, as it grows. We need to address the non-lethal forms of violence for two reasons. A, it has an impact. You may never get shot or stabbed, but being cursed at, yelled at, maybe spat on, that's going to have an impact on your stress level. As for employers, that's going to have an impact on your job turnover. It's a big issue. It could lead to lawsuits, hostile workplace claims, and things like that. So it does have an impact, even though, let's say no one actually gets physically hurt. However, these things need to be addressed because they often escalate. So I'm assuming here, I'm making an assumption just to, I don't know if this really happened, but going back to that union, there's a chance that that shooter got into an argument with those elected officials before, that in the past there was some confrontation, maybe a threat was made, probably some curse words were exchanged, and it did not get documented. It wasn't addressed at that point. I don't know. I'm making an assumption here, but we could it assumed it wasn't nothing was done that actually worked. If there was an intervention, it certainly did not remove the threat. But do you see my point here? Is we need to address things to prevent them from escalating, and that's what this workshop's all about. How do we deal with that verbal harassment so it doesn't end up becoming a homicide? All right, so let's jump into it. That's why you're here, and that's why I'm here. The first step, by the way, let me give you a little background, just a little bit about myself. I could talk about my professional stuff, but my real deal is I used to run group homes for adjudicated youth, runaway kids, and dual diagnosed youth, so kids who had developmental issues and behavioral issues. I ran 2 group homes, and teenagers, right, 13 to 18-year-old kids that have like behavioral issues. What I saw over and over again, I was the manager, so I had employees looking at this. It really came down to how the caseworker, how the employee responded to the young people. When they got upset, when they became hostile and angry at the kids, it certainly escalated. So my point is, when you encounter hostility, the first step, and it continues throughout the entire experience, is maintain your cool. It's fine. We are humans. We are mammals. You could argue about that, evolution, but we are animals, right? We have chemicals coursing through our body, testosterone, we've got adrenaline, all these other factors such as your heart rate increasing, your breath might become more shallow. This is biologically what we were developed. Our species survived because we had a physiological response to a threat. And so when someone's yelling at us, perceived as a threat, we have this response. This might seem obvious to you folks, but it really is core. Here's the bottom line. If you can keep your cool, there's a good chance that you're going to be able to handle this effectively. I know you came to this training to learn something. I hope to teach something, but I believe that you have the skills already. Most people do, to handle things. Think about the last fight you got into with a family member or a friend. It's because you lost your cool that things escalated. It's how you respond, right? So please understand that this is important, because that your cognitive abilities are limited. What your options, the way you're noticing things, the way you look at the bigger picture, it's going to change when you're upset. It's okay to be upset. The factor is, what are you doing in terms of saying, hey, I'm too upset to handle this, and you get help? Or do you take a break? Or do you end the meeting? Or it may help, for myself, like a little tip is, when I recognize that I'm upset and just calling myself on it, that helps, just to accept I'm angry. Okay, now I realize I'm in an angry state as I work with this person. That helps you regulate your response, because it all comes down to push comes to shove. You're going to start bowing up. You're going to start speaking faster. You're going to start yelling. Maybe you'll slip out something you didn't mean to say. Before you know it, push comes to shove, knife leads to gun. I think that's kind of obvious. So what is it with you? Like, I don't know who's on this call. I don't know who you are, but what is it that helps you calm down? Those cliches work. Talking to 10, counting to 10, deep, slow breaths. Remember a quote that you appreciate. Here's my little tip. When I'm overwhelmed and really upset and I don't know what to do, I think about people I respect. I think about good people who are really good at handling tense and awful situations, just whoever that figure is in your life. And then I pretend, what would that person do? And just imagining them there, well, this is what Pop would do, or this is what Jane Ann would do. That helps me know what my next step should be when I'm feeling overwhelmed and just really ticked off at this person. Please understand, when we talked about the adrenaline, I want to go back to the physiological response, that this is how our bodies were built. So when you encounter hostility, someone bows up, gets in your face and starts calling you names, it may depend upon who you are, it depends upon who they are, but you might get angry and clench your fists, and that's a physiological response. Also, the flight thing, and by flight, I don't mean you're literally running away like Jack Sparrow here, but you are thinking, you're closing down, you're just giving up, you just want to escape. It's that attitude that I'm talking about. I want to mention that there's a third response, and that's also very, very common, and that's freeze. When you encounter hostility, you have to recognize, it's really about knowing who you are, that when you encounter intense situations, are you the type that freezes up? You think, I don't know who you are, but you know who your friends and your family, and there's some people, when I've been in situations where I've had to literally like throw someone over my shoulder to get them out of that situation because they literally froze. And it's just a matter of knowing who you are. It's no characterization judgment, but know how you respond to situations so that you can be prepared when you encounter these situations. Now, regarding those who get angry, I'm going to deal with those folks, and it may determine, it depends on who the situation, what's going on. While you might be, let me say that with hot buttons, what I'm talking about here is, when is it that someone says something? It might be a phrase, it might be a word. I don't want to use any offensive terms in this presentation, but you know what I'm talking about. There's some ugly words out there. When people use it, it's almost like a trigger. While I could, while I'm not going to curse and use any foul language, but there's insults like stupid, right? I mean, you could swear like a sailor and it doesn't affect them, but if you call someone stupid, maybe that's what, their abusive stepmother called them or something, and that's that hot button. The point of this slide is, know what your hot button is and realize it's being pressed. A very important issue, and this is from my experience of working with youth, is that they know you've got a hot button and they're trying to press it. For kids, I could tell a quick story, but for young kids, they want the counselors to lose their cool, to do something stupid, so they get fired. Like, it's a general rule that if a counselor slaps or smacks a youth client, they're fired. No questions asked, boom, you're gone. And so the trick was to get the counselor to hit you. You don't care about getting hit because you know they're going to end up getting fired. Do you see my point here? Now, that was conscious. They were deliberately doing this. In other arguments, and I'm guilty of it, you're in an argument, something, you might say something a little nasty because you just want to get into a fight with them, and then they say something nasty back to you, and now it's escalating. Do you understand? You have to be aware of what your hot buttons are and know that you're getting upset. So at which point you could do several things. A, cut out, get help, end the meeting. Or B, just knowing it. Hey, they're pressing my hot button on purpose. I know this is my hot button. I'm not going to let this person control me. When I worked with youth, and I ran girls and boys, and guess which one was the more difficult one? Working with the boys, one thing I tried to instill in young men was, there was a lot of like power controls, alpha male battles going on, and I tried to tell them, when someone gets you angry, they're controlling you. You're just a puppet. And so that really helped the young men realize, if they're getting angry and someone's making you angry, you're being manipulated, and just being cognizant of that helped keep the person calmed down. So what's your hot button? Be aware of it. Now, I know none of you all are professionals, and you are mature adults, and you would never wind up and crack someone across the face being so angry. Hopefully you wouldn't. But what we've all seen when we've worked with other professionals, whether it's you're at the cell phone store trying to get your phone fixed, or you're at the DMV trying to get your license, you can encounter this passive aggressive hostility, and you're upset. I'm saying, if you're at the perspective of the staff person working with someone, be aware when you're pulling the passive aggressive thing. You could be polite, you could say all the right things, you could use please, thank you, ma'am, and sir, but you're being obnoxious to them. You know when someone's being this way with you, and you didn't like it, right? So be aware when you're doing it to others. I'm here in the South. I'm in Alabama. No offense to Southerners, I'm just putting it out there, but we're very polite down here with what they're saying. But there's phrases, there's things that people say. One, if I quick story is bless your heart. Like down here in the South, if someone makes a mistake or does something dumb, they say, bless your heart. And it took me years to figure out what that means is you're a moron. Um, so it sounds nice, bless your heart, but do you get the point? So be aware because they know you're acting this way. The other thing that I want you to be aware of is fear. And it's okay. It's all right to recognize that you're frightened. It could be a really huge guy who's waving his fist around and you don't want to get decked. That's totally makes sense. But you have to appreciate that that fear is influence your behavior, which influences the interaction. I'm going to talk later about expert aggressors, and they purposely use your fear. It's a tactic, and you need to be aware of it. It's fine if you're afraid. It's not okay if that fear is leading you to behaviors such as giving in to them, which is causing the problem. When we see fear, being intimidated, you might you try to calm them down, right? And this is the positive reinforcement for their aggression. When you back up, give in, yes sir, I'm sorry, yes I'm sorry, we'll fix that, whatever you say sir, and you allow them to abuse you, they're manipulating you, and that's dangerous. One factor when we look at abusive relationships, or we look at workplace violence, you see often a continuum where the individual is getting away with stuff along the way, and it might be fear, different factors why that person's allowed to get away with it. But often when they get so egregious, so bad that you draw a line, you say, hey, you can't do that, or that behavior is not acceptable. That's when they respond violently because they feel entitled to that control. Does that make sense? Be aware of the fear. What is it? Getting help. What do? You get help. Recognize the fear and then you address it. Whatever it might be, just be cognizant of it. So that's all about you. In terms of moving out, I just quickly created this little graph just to give a visual. The idea is that when you see someone who's angry and hostile, de-escalate it, calm them down, bring them down. I know that's the whole point of this webinar. However, at some point, it's beyond just calming them down. It's a matter of setting boundaries when they've crossed a line. And that's very important why you have to set boundaries. And then finally, if you're in danger, if you feel threatened, that's all about your survival and others. I'm going to go over these all in detail now. Now, we talked about recognizing the warning signs of you getting upset. Recognize the warning signs when they are upset. So, duh, how can you tell someone is angry? Do I need a slide on this? There's the cursing, there's the waving arms around, there, hands on the hips, arms folded, do I need to do a workshop on what an angry person looks like? Maybe so, because even though it's obvious with the outwardly angry person, here we have good old Captain James T. Kirk mad at the Khan for killing his son, and the great overactor William Shatner is very good at expressing rage very well. So you could tell that he's going to open up a can of kicking butt soon. You see this person's angry, but this picture on the right with the guy with his mouth shut, there's a seething, quiet kind of anger, which you also must be aware of. Now, if you're alone talking to this person, you have to be silly not to recognize it. Well, I take that back. Very often caseworkers, people who have to deal with like 50 different individuals all day long, phones answering, need to answer emails, you got a million things, you may not be paying attention. If someone's yelling and throwing furniture around, yeah, boy, that person's angry. But someone could have this stare, this look, this energy, if I could use that word, of intense anger, and you have to be looking at them to pick up on it, or maybe the way they say things. So this comes down to awareness. Be aware of it. A couple other points. One thing when we talk about awareness, when we talk about large groups, let's say if you're ever dealing with a group of people that are upset. I've seen this over and over again when I was with the Asheville Police Department. We were dealing with crowds. The angry, yelling person throwing bottles gets our attention, maybe rightfully so, but that's not the one who's really the most dangerous. The person that we may really need to be focusing on is the quiet one that's got this quiet sort of anger in it. And that's a matter of doing the 360, taking in everyone, looking at them. And if you see someone with that deadly stare, that's what we need to focus in on. One other point that I want to make is I'd be very careful. It's a warning sign. It's a red flag if someone's yelling, screaming, making a fool of themselves, and not getting what they want. If they're not getting what they want and they shift to the quiet, it's not like, well, whatever, I give up, I don't care anymore, fine. But if suddenly they're like, all right, that's the way it's going to be, that's the choice that you made. Do you hear the threat in there? And they suddenly reduce down? That's a warning sign, folks. That could be they're about to immediately do some violence, or they could be coming back with a gun. It all depends on the threat assessment. But recognize when we're looking at warning signs, look for that quiet anger, which can often be the more serious. Now, as a separate topic, this is not my idea. In fact, using these terms comes from a guy named Sean Smith, who wrote a book, Surviving Aggressive People. And he identified two types of aggressors. There's the desperate aggressor and the expert aggressor. The desperate aggressor is the everyday Joes like you and me who are maybe going through a hard time. So let me give the characteristics of I'll talk about myself. So like I was at the hospital. My wife was giving birth. Literally, my wife is giving birth, right, to a baby, our second. And I was in the emergency room with my son, my toddler, who had a small fracture in his elbow from falling and playing on the playground. Actually, he was fine. But the guy wouldn't let me leave. My son was fine, cast was on, we were all done, and I wanted to go up to see my wife who's in labor. And he wouldn't let me leave. And I got a little snippy, a little obnoxious with him. I'm a nice guy, right? But here we got to understand, here's a guy who's got a son who's injured, a wife who's going through labor. I'm a little agitated, right? Heaven forbid, thank God that my wife was not in any concern. There was no medical concerns. Try to imagine if it was a worst case scenario. I've been in the waiting rooms of hospitals quite a bit. And when we're talking about people who are seriously ill, critical injuries, you're going to see very nice people get very ugly because they're upset. And then this is where we see listening skills, providing support, building rapport really does matter because they don't mean to be angry. The opposite is the expert aggressor. And if you know the individual with the hat and the cigar, that's Al Capone. Like, I don't know, I love gangster. I've been watching a lot of mob movies lately. And these guys never, scream and yell, except for the first son of the Godfather, Vinny. He was that type. But, the real hitmen, they smile. They were fine. Now, they may become angry and they may get violently abusive, but it's a tactic. This goes back to when we talk about fear. There's individuals who are purposely knowing they're using aggression to influence you, whether to intimidate you. Well, that's why actually they do it to intimidate you. This is where we talk about crossing a line and setting clear boundaries. So real quickly, desperate aggressors are those who are upset about something and you want to solve their problem. And I found it, believe me, I've been in many cases where someone did really obnoxious, wrong things and it got scary for a while, but I worked with them, and when they calmed down, they apologized to me. Expert aggressors are trying to see, what can I get away with? Can I intimidate this person? They're never going to apologize. And if they do, it's a tactic. So do you understand? This is very important when we look at these things. You might be able to tell what kind of aggressor you're dealing with immediately, but it's how you're treating them. It's how you're working with them that can reveal what their motives are. And let's go through those tactics right now. And I'll discuss this later. Now, for the desperate aggressor, when I'm in the emergency room with my son. My wife is in labor. If the nurse was a male, okay. So yeah, so but that male is just like, listen. If I just went to, hey, my wife is in labor right now. My son is fine. He's just got his cast on. I just need to go. He wouldn't let me go. He didn't give me a sheet on cast care. Like I'm a first responder. I know how to take care of a freaking cast, but he would not let me go till he handed me the sheet on how to take care of a cast. And he was taking, like, you ever been in a waiting room in a hospital or been in a hospital? I was like there for about 45 minutes waiting for this piece of paper telling me how to take care of a cast. If he listened to me, if he tried to go, what's going on? And then he said, wow, man, I'm so sorry. Yeah, that's really tough. I understand you're really upset. It could alleviate things. Now, I told a lot of anecdotes. In terms of skills, active listening is the process where you are not talking. You're not telling them what they did wrong. You're not talking. You're silent and you're listening to them. Eye contact, presenting to them. You are not on the phone. You're not checking your text. That's a whole millennial, like, younger generation thing, is that it's kind of considered okay to have a conversation while you're looking at your phone. Don't do that while someone's angry at you, right? And other issues. When they do stop, instead of replying right back with what they did wrong, what they should do, confirm you understand what's going on with them. Active listening means when they're done talking, you repeat back to them what their issue is. Help identify the problem. Sir, golly, your wife's in labor and you have some experience with medical stuff, so you've got this down. I know you're concerned about your wife. It's a big day for you, isn't it? The guy just said that to me. I'd be like, yeah, you get it. And what we're doing is we're establishing rapport. You're showing that you are listening to them, right? And another important part is if there's a problem, if there's a grievance, only by really identifying the problem can you fix it. Now, a lot of times, like, as you know, a lot of people are just ranting. All they want to do is complain. That's the real problem. You're dealing with people which they don't really want to fix the problem. They just want to complain. The type. That's where you still want to address their emotions. Prove to them that, yes, you get it. There are points where you can't let them extend, talking for 20 minutes at a time. Get to the point, help fix it, but don't cut them off. Give them some time just to vent. Sometimes people just need to vent. But I believe that with a lot of desperate aggressors, 80% of this could be solved by just really listening to them. And then when you talk, show that you're listening to them. Repeat back what's going on. Build some rapport with them. Build that connection with them. Then you can start moving towards solution. Okay, that's the solution. So once you've identified what the problem is, whatever the issue is, then help them fix it. Again, I'm going from a client worker perspective. I keep going back to this guy in the emergency room, but get me the friggin' sheet, right? Get me the cast care sheet, so then it's dealt with, I can move on and go with it. Or, I'm concerned about my wife. It's the same hospital. Could he call up, talk to the OBGYN nurses up there and give me an update saying, hey, you know what? I just heard from the nurse taking care of your wife. She's doing fine. She's doing great. That sort of stuff. Do you understand the point is address the grievance? This is a no-brainer, but that's the problem. Now, again, I want to go back to what I was earlier saying, that there might be a grievance about, seeing my wife or getting a sheet on cast care, but the real issue is the respect, the humility, that's how you treat people. That nurse was like, really, you could tell I had some animosity towards him, right? He was pretty rude towards me, and that led to my anger towards him. If I had an overwhelmed, it's kind of like when you're dealing with a waiter in the restaurant and they're blowing your order, they're not serving your food. You could tell when they're in the weeds and you can work with them, but when the waiters are just rude to you, that's where you don't have any compassion for them and leave a lousy tip. Fix the problem, but along with it, realize that the violence would be based on their emotional response to how you treated them. Treat them with respect. Now, here's another little tip. This is an important quick one. If there's an audience, I don't know what the context is that you're working with, but it could be people that they came with, like in social services, often the whole family comes. In a workplace setting, maybe, this is a joke. I think these guys are just wrestling around. I just found a pic just to give it. But if this was a real fight between two guys, one of the problems is that there's an audience. very often the audience will egg things on, and that's why you want to get rid of the audience, because the audience is the problem. When we talk about respect and their dignity, it's no longer about what the issue is. It's about their status within their group. It might be strangers on the street. It may be their coworkers. It might be their family members who came with them. But if they make a statement like, I'm not leaving here until I get X, Y, and Z, suddenly it's no longer about whether they get X, Y, and Z. It's about their status in front of their peers or their family members about, is this person going to be played a chump and actually they're going to walk out with what they demanded? Do you see what I mean? So what we want to do is we want to remove the audience if that's possible, or if you can't do that, then talk to that person alone. Again, you want to be safe. Don't go to a dangerous location where you're isolated and you can't get help. But over and over again, I could tell a quick story. When I used to work with youth in with Outward Bound, doing adjudicated youth. These are kids who either can go to jail, go to juvie, or do these month-long expeditions. Two young men were arguing, trying to fight, and they're always like threatening each other. I was really tired, and I dragged them out into the middle of the woods, and I said, okay guys, just fight. I'll make sure no one gets hurt. Just go ahead and decide who's the big dog here, and then we'll go back and have lunch. Of course the kids did not fight. The point is that those two young men had to act tough in front of the 10 other boys, because it's about the audience, it's about their status, and that's what was the issue at the hand. I don't recommend doing that. That was a stupid thing. I was a young person making that stupid decision to handle it that way. But what was demonstrated was the audience was the problem, not necessarily the conflict between the two folks. So remove the audience. Moving on. Now, I don't know the nature of your work. If you work with the same customers and clients, if you got the same folks coming in, maybe you're a caseworker, it's really important about building relations. As I mentioned earlier, active listening is a real important step for just building that connection, but get to know them. It's stupid stuff. I don't mean to say it's stupid, but it's little things like, do they have a dog? Are they a cat person? What's their favorite sports team? You start off that conversation talking about that game that happened last weekend, or how's little Muffy doing? It's showing that there's a level of care there. Violence is committed against the other. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, especially when we look at national things, what's going on today in our country today. People look at the other as bad, and they'll attack them because they're Democrats, or they're Trump supporters, or they're Islamists, or they're French, whatever it might be, but it's the other that's the problem. If you could show that you've got some connection with them, building rapport, they won't say, hey, I'm going to hit this person because they're part of this system. One serious problem with government workers, there's a lot of animosity towards government. I used to work for government, and I work with a lot of my clients are government, and a lot of people have an issue with government. Maybe you do yourself, and when they come to the DMV or courthouse, and they just see this person there, they're thinking this is government. They're not recognizing this person as Sam, or as a sister, or as another person who loves dogs. But if you can build that rapport with them, that's important. So naturally, for long-term relationships, get to know these little things so you can build the connection. But even immediately, real quick, I've seen really good law enforcement officers do this, where they're dealing with a stranger, they never dealt with them before, but they do this little friendliness, making them jokes, making them see from a bumper stick what that person's into, and they build some sort of connection with them that's important. Because what we want to do is not have them see you as the other, as some alien that's okay to get rid of, because it's a tribalism sort of approach to that's really stems a lot of the violence that's going on now. Okay. How else do we do it? Here's a tip. This is just a quick little, hey, maybe this is handy. But if you're working with people in a office setting, or you can't do it on the street, obviously, but there's something about sharing food. It's breaking bread. If someone feeds you, you can't really be mad at someone who feeds you. That happened to me once, and I got really mad that they got mad at me after I fed them. But it's about breaking bread. It's a connective thing. It's even like, I've traveled a lot in other countries. It is so it was so primal. It's so instinctive that I'm sitting next to someone, we both don't speak each other's language, we don't speak a common third language together, but if I share food with them, everyone knows what that means. It's a connection thing. The other factor I want to two things that it adds is if you take that break, if things are escalating, getting worse, hey, let's go to the snack machine. Wait a minute, can I get you a bottle of water? That little shift, that break to get the food or get the bottle of water could be that break you need to shift things. And then finally, this is my experience more working with like with the youth issues, especially behavioral, the group home things. Food for some folks, I'm speaking more to the social workers, those who deal with maybe those who are suffering in society. Hunger leads to problems. Who's a little snippy when they're hungry? I know I am. If you could just feed them, it could come down to a blood sugar thing. That could be a factor as well. So simple tip, feed them, give them something, take a break, go to the snack machine. That could change things. That's just some quick tips about de-escalating. I'd appreciate, there's plenty more, but I'm trying to concise this, get it down to 45 minutes or so. That's all about things you can do to lower them down. Going back to the desperate aggressor. If you feed, if that guy, that nurse said, hey, let me bring something for your boy. He looks a little hungry, and brought him some animal crackers. Or, he starts talking to me about, all the fears that every young father has when their partner is in labor. Just relate to me with that. That would have chilled me out in that case. But for expert aggressors who don't care about being de-escalated, they're testing you. You need to set clear boundaries. Often with the desperate aggressors, they may become so upset that they do something inappropriate. What you do is you set clear boundaries. Now, what that line is may depend on you. You got your own personal line about, do you allow cursing? Do you allow someone screaming at you? Do you allow someone to lay their hands on you? Generally, I would say no, but again, it comes up to you what that is. One thing that I strongly believe is you need to identify the behavior clearly. I'm not a fan of, or I don't suggest that you say, cut it out. You need to stop that. Or you need to oh, hey, when has it ever worked that you told someone to calm down? They're like, oh, yeah, sorry, okay, I'll calm down. It's one of the worst things you could ever do is tell someone to calm down, right? I mean, yeah, it doesn't work. Now, with that, you identify clearly what the behavior is: cursing, shouting, sticking a finger in your face, standing up. And then what you do is you let them know what the consequences are. It's not meant to be a threat. Let's give a great example. If I'm yelling and cursing at that nurse and saying I'm gonna, getting in his face and acting all tough, he could say, sir, you need to lower your voice. You can't be cursing in here, and I need you to sit down. So that's very clear. No yelling, no cursing, sit down. Or what were the things? Well, he threatened, which is funny because I was with the police. This is the funny thing is, I'm going to get the police. And they're like, I'm with the police, buddy. So anyways, what you want to do is you want to set boundaries, but be very careful about making threats because you never want to pull the authority figure. A lot of people do not and respond very negatively to when they're being threatened. It's about the mutual respect in order to move forward. If you say, sir, we need to finish this meeting. I want to help you. Let's get your form filled out. Let's get that service to you. Let's get this product. Let's get your another bowl of soup for you because there's a fly in your soup, whatever it is. Let's get that. But right now, I need you to stop cursing and we need to stop yelling. If not, then I can't continue on. We're going to have to ask you to leave. We'll have the police come in here. Whatever it is, it depends on what the behavior is, depending upon what the consequences are. That makes sense. But naturally, usually it's about, we're going to have to ask you to leave, and it may involve security escorting them to leave. That would be the natural consequence. Here's a very important part about setting boundaries. If you don't know this, you know this if you have kids or pets, right? But if you set a rule, you must follow through with it. This is the expert aggressor concern. If an expert aggressor is testing you and you say, hey, you need to stop cursing, and then they'll test you. And this is my experience working with kids. Kids naturally, it's what they do is they test their boundaries. It's almost their role when they're a teenager is to be testing boundaries. And what you need to do is set a boundary, and then vitally, you must follow through. The most dangerous thing you could do with an expert aggressor is to set a boundary and then let them cross it again, because at which point they own you. They go, this is a chump. I got them now, and then they're going to be pushing things a lot further. Set consequences, follow through with them. If you are frightened to set a consequence, like if you feel like you can't even tell them you're going to ask them to leave, that's at the point where you're being threatened. That's a whole other level. So the question is, do you feel comfortable with that? Set those boundaries, be clear with it, be firm, but don't be that authoritarian with them. Be very, very cautious about that. So if they keep crossing it, it's about, that's where they're disregarding you, or maybe they're jumping right in and you feel threatened. When are you threatened? Let me give you the quick definition of when you feel threatened. When you're threatened, it's when you feel threatened. Be aware of that, and be aware of your own, as I mentioned, maybe you're the type to get scared easily. Be aware that that's who you are. But if something in you, the hairs on the back of your neck, gut feeling, you think something's bad's going to happen, listen to it. There's a wonderful book called The Gift of Fear. Yes, fear is a gift, by a great security consultant, Gavin DeBecker. And he talks about that fear as being a tool. It's what helps you stay alive. Listen to that fear, because it could be an issue. Awareness is a much bigger picture. Now we're looking at when you feel threatened, especially for the worst case where the person has a weapon. Is it August in the South and they're wearing a trench coat and a sweater and heavy clothes that could conceal the weapon? Did they bring a bag with them that's carrying some heavy object in it? It's that sort of awareness things where you're looking at the 360 situation about what the concerns are. Real tip with this is what I found with desperate aggressors, is that often it's not a threat, but they're saying, hey, I'm about to lose my cool, and do not get in my face, or do not say this, or whatever. If I don't get what I want, it's really subtle, but they're trying to help you. Just from personal experience, I've been threatened. And it wasn't like, I'm going to kick your ass, Johnny. They're going to say something saying, hey, I don't want to get violent, but I'm about to lose my cool. That's not really a threat. They're trying to help. I've recognized this as that they're trying to help, at which point, back up. Let's take a breather. Let's get something to eat. What's going on? And we don't have to head in this direction. But listen to those warnings when they come through. It may be the expert aggressor who's testing whether a threat would work with you, at which point you've got to say, hey, we can't have these threats going on. It's going back to the crossing line. That's an absolute line. No one should ever threaten you. If they threaten you, you need to set boundaries, or it's about protecting yourself and about these other steps I'm about to cover, about making sure that you're safe. The bottom line is, I talked about awareness about weapons, but physically, because most of the assault are punches, kicks, and bites and stuff like that, it's about your proxemics. How close are you to them? Law enforcement officers, when they're dealing with a suspect or someone, they're really cagey. They have this weird distance. In America, it's the common stance for talking in a conversation of about 2 or 3 feet apart. Like you're talking to someone, they're about 2 feet from you. Be at least 6 feet distance from them. No matter, if you think that they might hit you, create that space. If it means you're backing up, back on up. Also, how can you back up? Are you cornered? This is very important when you think about where your meetings are happening. When they will not hit you. The best self-defense in the world, I think this is from Karate Kid, the best self-defense in the world is not being there in the first place. So leave, be able to leave. And of course, there's factors about, again, I was talking about the distance with them. Now, in terms of your environment, being able to leave, there's a lot of factors involved. One thing is, where are you meeting people? Where is this conflict occurring? With domestic violence, one of the big things that, when we do safety planning is when, for victims who the abuser starts getting hostile, the temperature's rising, we often tell them, get out of the kitchen. Do y'all know why the kitchen is a dangerous place for abusers losing their temper? So get out of there, go to another location. Of course, get out of the abusive relationship, but get out of that kitchen because it's the most dangerous. Now, maybe, you work in a group home or you work in a restaurant and there's kitchens right there. But I'm assuming with the white collar office environment, one thing you want to look at is potential weapons, scissors, letter openers, big heavy objects, anything around there that could be used as a weapon. Again, that's part of that awareness. In general, keep such items out of view, out of reach. But for whatever reasons, you can't fasten down. Anything could be a weapon: a pencil, a chair, a monitor, things like that. So think about where you're having your meetings. Here's a CPS worker, that's Child Protective Services. They encounter a lot of hostility. Where she is, if she's dealing with a client, she's kind of caged in there. If I came in from her left, like the opposite side from her computer, like the entrance to her little cubicle area, she's blocked in. Maybe she could hop over the desk, and I bet she could, but that's not a great place to have an encounter with a father. They're saying, hey, you're going to lose custody of your children. We're coming to take the children out of your home. You should not say something like that while you're sitting at that desk, because you got no backup. So here's what we're looking for: is choose your battles. Choose where you're going to meet. If you know you're going to have a hostile encounter, where is it going to be? I like to have places with multiple exits, limited weapons. People can see in. Now, naturally, within healthcare and stuff like that, there's confidentiality concerns. So people can't overhear what you're saying, but they should be able to see what's going on. Also, don't have it so isolated, down in the basement, down the hallway where no one else works. Have it so others can hear that that you may need trouble. Speaking of which, then summon support. It all depends. If you have a panic button, that's great. There's apps for that. There's phone apps if you have a smartphone. Another thing I'm a fan of is establishing code words with your coworkers, so that you could, say, oh, sir, that's a good point. I think Steve handles that issue. Let me contact Steve and see where we are with blah blah blah. You call Steve, and then when you're talking to Steve, you go, yes, we have a client here. I'm trying to help him. Yeah, oh, by the way, yeah, we're having the birthday at 4 o'clock today. And there's no birthday, but that's your code word, birthday, or yellow file. I've worked for places where they use red file for serious concerns, yellow file for medium concerns. Whatever it's going to be, make it so that you can communicate that you're in trouble, that you need help, in order to tip them off that they can contact security. That's all, whatever protocols you set up. This is, by the way, the most dangerous kind of work you can do is at-home healthcare. So meaning if you're working on the field, and this is something that I do suggest when I set up their safety protocols, is with your system, set up a code word. So if you're held hostage somewhere and you say, hey, let me call into the office, let them know I'm going to be running late, or whatever, you want to call in and let them know you're in danger. Set up a code word. That's all about you contacting them. There's another side to this, and this is about us taking care of each other. This is about coworkers listening in. Hey, we know that Johnny's talking to that crazy person again. I'm not going to go to lunch break right now. I'm going to hang out by their office and see if they still need help. There's two sides to communication. There's summoning support, and then there's being available for that support as well. Yes, security should be a security role, but for the de-escalation, and later on I'm going to do this program on prevention teams. It's about coworkers developing teams to help each other. That's where we need to be ready to provide that support. Now, moving on, I want to talk about physical confrontations. This is talking about you having that angry response. And it happens, I'm not going to be sexist. It happens with, women as well, but just being a guy, I'll talk about my own fights that I've been into. Guys buck up. We throw our chest out and we get face to face, and we prove how tough we are to get in their face, and we don't back down. Hey, this is wrong body language. Let's just pretend I just find this picture on the internet just to represent two guys squaring off. But maybe the guy in the white shirt's a caseworker, and the guy in the black shirt's one of his clients. You don't ever do that. Get in their face. And now the worker might be initially having that visceral, instinctive response. Hey, you're going to threaten me? Bring it. We're professionals. Back out. But even if you're doing that and you're handling it, there's one point I want to make out here: is don't touch them. This is from my experience of working with youth in some scary situations. If they're going off, they're getting in their face, you may push them, like they get in literally in your face, you might push them back, or they stick a finger in your face like they're being obnoxious, and you move that hand out of your face to get their finger out of your nose. Don't touch them. It's a go button. Even if you don't violently touch them or hit them, as soon as you have physical contact, it initiates the violence. This is just as simple. Maybe I'm beating a dead horse here, but I hope you understand what I'm talking about. If someone's angry, keep your hands off of them. This is different from, I know people now talk about what if I'm being assaulted. That's a whole other level. It's about escaping, and yes, you have the right to defend yourselves. One thing where I've seen, like in retail establishments and bouncers, I have a lot of friends who are bouncers, and they're very, very, very aware of these factors. Now, bouncers have their role about removing someone, but the point is, if you feel still fine, like it's a young person, you can handle them. If you lay your hands on them, they react violently, and you escort them out. If you're an employee somewhere, if you're part of government, you're part of a large company, they're going to be coming back with their posse. Yes, there's their posse. There's their gang that they've got coming up to take you out. Is it, MS-13? No, it's Sanders and Bryson law firm. It's going to be coming back to you, and they're going to be wearing a neck brace. Suddenly it's, and by the way, you probably violated your own employee rules about putting your hands on them. Therefore, the employer is not going to protect you from your nest egg, your retirement, your home is now on the lawsuit as well. So be aware of that. And then I'm kind of making a joke here with the lawsuit, but they could very well come back with a gun as well. My point is, even if you feel like you can take them, don't. Yes, you have a right to defend yourself, but only to the point where you can escape. If you feel threatened, the bottom line is notify others if they are in danger as well, and leave. It does not mean you're a coward, does not mean you're scared. It means you're doing your job by leaving. And this is, of course, important why you need to have that escape route, having your back to the door, think about where you're having that meeting, and just go. Then naturally, what is it, calling law enforcement, calling your own security, whatever it might be, afterwards once you've proven that you're indeed safe. Now, it's really important, of course, that you document these events. Now, one problem I've got is with veteran employees who've, social workers who've done everything, seen everything, and they dealt with it, they handle it. My argument with that is the next person who takes over that case, the young person who's not as good or as experienced as you, there's no evidence of that. It's really important that you document it so that you could track it, so that you've got some proof of it. There's a saying that goes, if it's not documented, it did not happen. And in one context, that's very, very true. One thing that it also provides is that documentation provides justification for support and funding. I've been in management. I own 2 companies. I'm not going to spend money unless I see that there's an evidence, there's proof that there needs to be an issue. If, at your annual budget, you're finding that a lot of your coworkers are being assaulted, let's say in the field coworkers, maybe this is where we're going to invest in some panic buttons on them, or more training, or a buzzer door on the front lobby, all things like that. But they're not going to really be willing to open up that checkbook to do it unless there's some documentation of issues. One quick note from me doing investigations is, whenever you do the investigation, if there's multiple witnesses, talk to them separately, have them do a separate report. So there's something that happens when we have multiple people talking together about an event, that the story merges, and you really want to get, the story from different people at different times. That's why you see police officers always talking to people individually when they're trying to find out what's going on. Finally, with that report, if they made some threats, it might have ended peacefully, no one got hurt there, but are they coming back with a gun? Did they make some threats? That report could initiate a threat assessment. I just did a workshop just before I hopped on this webinar on a threat assessment, but it's not going to be initiated. No one's going to know to start that assessment unless a report is made. It's vital. It's really the weak link when we look at mass shooting and workplace violence prevention, in my humble opinion. So folks, I want to, hopefully you found this valuable, but I really want to wrap up and say the best way you can maintain a healthy violence-free workplace is about creating that empathetic, respectful workplaces where people treat everyone with respect, co-workers look out for each other, and in that kind of place that you're tending to do your job more seriously. Toxic work environments breed violence. Healthy workplaces help identify concerns much early on, and you're more likely to get the support and the attention that it requires to prevent it from escalating if you got that healthy workplace. That's really the core issue. So folks, thank you so much. I don't know, there's kind of quite I know there's a lot of participants, but you're welcome to ask questions or chat points right now, and I'd be glad to answer them. While I'm doing that, I want to say thank you so much. Let me hop over while you're thinking of the next thing. I got a couple other webinars coming up. We're right here doing this one. Sorry, I didn't change the date, because that was the earlier date. But I am doing one on why there appears to be more mass shootings in America and what influence that might be. And then we look at manifestos of mass shooters as well. And I'll be doing quite a few more trainings. I got to update this page. We'll be doing that soon, but join us. Folks, I'm just continuing on to see if there's any other questions. One final note, I'm wrapping it up. I'm not trying to sell you anything for you joining us, but the presentation is over. I just want to show you one neat tool right here. We've got a e-panic button. If you want to have a way to get support, there's ways that you can do that in order to click this and send out emails, text messages, and desktop pop-up alerts that look like this across your organization to get help. If you're interested, just reply back to our email. We'd be glad to set you up with that. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording, and please let me know if there's anything I can do to help you or your coworkers stay safe. Enjoy, everyone. Have a great weekend.